History.
We shall never surrender.
Politics.
Where there is discord, may we bring harmony.
Current affairs.
Going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do.
Conspiracies.
Ask not what your country can do for you.
We'll stop terrorists from coming after us.
I just received a beautiful letter from Kim Jong-un.
It concludes that Iraq has chemical and biological weapons.
I'm not guilty of harassing anyone.
Well, I'm not a crook.
This is the Political Darkside podcast. And now, here's your host, Matthew Howland.
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
Welcome to episode 15 of the Political Darkside podcast. A quick reminder to everyone to follow the show on social media and subscribe to the various feeds through politicaldarkside.com. My guest is one of my personal podcast inspirations and gave me bits and pieces of advice to set up this show. If you don't already know him, then I recommend listening to any of the hundreds of episodes of his show, Those Conspiracy Guys, which averages roughly 5 to 6 hours per episode. By the end of that, you'll feel like he's right there in the bed with you. Ladies and gentlemen, podcaster, comedian, the godfather of conspiracies, and appearing in here in accordance with YouTube's terms and conditions, it's Gordo. How you doing, Gordo?
What's going on, man? Yeah, YouTube. I'm a conspiratorian non grata in that motherfucker. But sure, look it. I managed to pull myself out before I got kicked out. Do you know? Like when you've had one too many drinks in a pub and the barman's kind of looking at you a bit squirrely and you're like, might want to come back here someday, so I'm going to bounce.
What did they chuck you out specifically for?
Oh, sure, what? You know, conspiracies, man. Shit they don't want you talking about. I don't think it was coup related. I don't think it was all well before that. So I think we bounced in 2018, but it was anything. Look at, man, I got a fucking 90-day ban off of lives on Instagram for sharing a historical photograph of the party in charge of Germany in the 30s, because I don't want to trigger any things here, you know. So
yeah,
so that
no, you're quite all right. I'll take my YouTube badge of honor if I ever actually get kicked off. So
well, technically, I didn't get kicked off. I did remove everything because look at you want to live stream sometimes. I was on Vimeo as well, man. And I had a bunch of stuff up there, and I spent about 2 months, about 3-4 hours a night, rendering out highest quality videos, because Vimeo is, you know, pretty good quality. Doing up all the descriptions, all the titles, uploading everything. And then one fateful evening, we had a video crystal knocked, and the whole thing just got shut down for 3 interviews that I had done that were up there for a while. An interview with David Icke from 2016, with John McAfee from early 2020 before lockdowns and stuff, and an interview with Dave Hayes, who was known as praying medic of the Q phenomenon, and he was one of those analyzers. And so they just said, they're the 3 videos we're kicking you off for, go fuck yourself. And I didn't, because I paid for my premium subscription, it was $1,200 or whatever for the year. And I was in my 3rd year, something like that, with them.
Yeah.
And there was no problems for 3 years. And this is almost like post-pandemic stuff. This is like January 2022. Like, what the fuck is going on in the state of Denmark, do you know? Very weird that I just get pushed off at that point. Yeah, after everything. Do you know?
yeah, it is odd. It was almost as if they were just looking for something to... Once they found you and realised what your work was, then maybe just went, oh, well, any excuse.
Well, it's no coincidence that about 10 days beforehand, I was trying to live stream using Vimeo, and I texted their help department through the website and said, hey, it's not working properly, blah, blah, blah. And then 10 days later, it was like, bye-bye. You're like, okay, well, so you can't have a faithful video hosting platform in any way, shape, or form in that case, you know? But look, I'm not mad controversial, actually. You know me, man. I'm not that. Like, I'm very much of the considered and the careful and I mean, outspoken, but like not unfounded.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to speak about those interviews that you did at some point during this vague structure that I've got, and also how you approach things. So I'll try and start at the beginning anyway. I met you at one of your live shows in Glasgow a few months back.
Yes, sir.
Where you essentially did an educational comedy lecture about George Orwell.
Squeezing the crack out of every bit of it, yeah. That was really good fun. Well, it was great to be in real life, like.
Yeah, well, apart from that lad that was sat at the front row.
He's all right. He's all right, that guy. What's his name again?
Yeah.
Mick. Mick.
Yeah. I think he'd had a couple of drinks, maybe. But
he had more than a few. But he sent me a text afterwards and told me that he was in. He said apologized and said he was in the middle of an existential crisis. So I said, "Join the fucking club. Join the fucking club, son."
That's fair enough.
That could be a vague description of almost anybody we know.
Yeah, pretty well. Certainly in this community.
Sure.
Given that you got through about 10 of your 50 slides that night due to the various tangents, I figured I should probably keep this quite broad and open. You're essentially like conversationally dangerous, so there's no point trying to ferry you down any particular alleys here. So probably going to be like doing one of those choose your own adventure books.
Yeah, turn to page 56 for a 19-minute rant.
Yeah. So,
the conspiracy theorist of Firetop Mountain. That's what we're.
Yeah. So what initially draws you to conspiracies and true crime?
I mean, the mystery, trying to figure it out. Like, you know, I always questioned stuff when I was a kid. Why? I was a why child. You know, taking stuff apart, trying to find out how things worked. Any kind of, computer or any kind of machine that came into the house, I always tried to figure it out to the best of my ability. Not just use it and utilize it, but try and figure out like how to get the most out of it. That's even as a small kid. And then later on, reading books, watching TV shows about alternative. Like I leaned towards more of the kind of, I say alternative now to sound really cool, like I'm alternative, but like the alternative stuff, you know, like and I like to write my own stuff. I was very imaginative. There was always a draw towards like non-conformity. I didn't really enjoy school. I was kind of sitting there going, why the fuck am I, why are we all here just facing the same way? Like, can I not go off and do my own thing? I've done the work that you've assigned to me. You told me to answer 10 questions. I did that in 2 or 3 minutes. And now I have to wait around for 24 minutes for these other motherfuckers to catch up. I'm not saying I'm a gifted child, but it was just that particular educational process was very easy for me, where I'd be given a task, read this shit, answer these questions, and like bing, bang, bing, bang, bong. Now, can I go and is the rest of the time my own until the rest of them are finished? No, we're going to give you more work for being fastidious. I'm like, well, shit. Let's see if we can fuck up this system. And then, like in my early teens, got into stuff like the X-Files and watched the movie JFK, which came out in the early 90s, and very much like shattered my worldview. And then, of course, smoking loads of hash, being a borderline teenage alcoholic kind of, put me off on a quest to figure out what's really going on. I was in history class and stuff, going like, this is all bullshit. And having clashes.
Well, what age are you now?
39.
So, okay, you would have been. Yeah, I'm just trying to put context in your age during the 90s for seeing X-Files and JFK.
Yeah, early teens. I was 12 in 95, so 13.
Right.
95. So like it was all very formative. Columbine happened, and we were of the age to be in high school when Columbine happened. I had just finished school, and I was just heading out to the big city with my bag under my arm, looking at my future spread out before me. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, and I was like, "Oh, the world is fucked." And that was kind of my Ace Ventura coming out the back of a rhino moment. Do you know? That's the imagery that I like to, psychologically, that's what happened to me. And your dog drinks really loudly, man.
Oh, I know.
That is your dog. It's not.
It might be Kirsty. I don't know.
It's not somebody else in the house.
Back in the cage, you. No, not really.
It was just like schlapped sounds. I was like, fuck, man. Somebody's in the other room on OnlyFans.
No, it's us that are on OnlyFans.
Yeah. We nearly did this show on the nip. You'd be surprised how dirty a parent would get when they're giving a child a bath, you know? And it's Father's Day today, you know?
Yeah, we had washed one of the dogs yesterday, and so much soap on him, one of my fingers nearly slipped up his arse. That was dreadful.
You can't do that when you're bathing a child. There's no accidentally there, you know?
That's call the authorities time, isn't it?
Yeah. The dog can't tell tales. That's what it is. What did he do, boy? Roar? I was like, okay, well, I don't know if that'll hold up in court.
Yeah, you can see the sadness in his eyes, though. So that's...
yeah, that shit don't hold up in court, you know. No. Sir, we've tested you for anal gland discharge. It's all over your hands and face. So
what page in the book are we on now here?
I don't know. Do you have to milk a dog's anal glands or else they'll get swollen up? Like, and no one tells you that when you're buying a dog. Do you think it's all like, you know, walks and pets and snuggles on the couch? But eventually you're going to have to pinch the butt sauce out of his arsehole.
He's 14 and nobody's mentioned that to us yet.
Or maybe he doesn't himself. Sometimes they get stuck and they kind of swell up, and then he'll just squirt them all over the curtain one day. You're like, what smells like death? It's like, yep. It's the forbidden mayonnaise. Anyway, I'm 19. I'm living in Dublin. I'm smoking hash loads, and just basically trying to figure out how to exist in society. 9/11 has happened. The .com crash had come and gone, and you know there wasn't a lot of hope for people at the time. Like Celtic Tiger was kind of going, but like it was only for people who wanted to go and study business. You know, if you were a businessman, you're making a few bob, but anybody who was in like creative arts or anything like that, it wasn't really a great time. And I don't know, man, just like doubting a narrative, watching the X-Files and feeling like a kinship towards like people who are looking for the truth. Not wanting to just accept things as they were, and being able to see like the lies through history, and being able to have access to a library to read books on stuff that we're being fed in school. Basically, like my caustic attitude towards being like industrially pumped full of regurgitatable information set me on an information quest in a completely opposite direction. I was basically like going, right, whatever you guys are fucking saying in here, the opposite must be true, because this feels terrible.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, school for me was it was a bit ironic actually, because in really early on, maybe first or second year, we did a JFK assassination project. That was part of the actual curriculum, which in retrospect feels bizarre now.
Did you do it as a group, and then when you handed it in, you just pretended it was one person?
No, it was individual. So I mean, like, so I'm sitting there going, hang about. So you like, you know, 10, 11-year-old me is going through all as much material as you could find at the time. You know, 99 sort of dial-up internet. You'd maybe
it was there. It was there if you knew where to look, man. I was on chat rooms and shit, like asking people for links, and a lot of stuff out there. A lot of websites that still exist today. Well, maybe not today, but when we started the show in like 2014. A lot of like GeoCities websites, and you know, a black background with bright purple writing, like eye fucking lasers. There's a lot of info there that set you off then on rabbit holes around the internet, and the way we started the show was very much like parsing through all that information. As it's grown in the last 9 years, it's become a lot more academic. My methods have become an awful lot more kind of honed and specialized, and I can find stuff now like through authors, and even contacting authors and all, like with the small bit of clout that I have, I'll be able to ring somebody up and go, hey, you wrote this book, do you want to come on and chat about it, or can you send me a copy of that book? And you know, you get to read about it, get to talk about it. Yeah, like the internet is a blessing for stuff like that. Yeah,
absolutely. I've had a reasonable luck actually, you know, speaking with authors of books and whatnot. So it's been quite nice. Like my first episode was actually with Gerard Williams, who wrote a book about Hitler buggering off to Argentina.
Yes, of course, the rat lines.
Yeah, so that was really like really odd that he'd, agree to speak to me as a first episode, given that, zero clout at that time. I've still got zero clout now, to be quite obviously. But, so be it. You were saying about, contacting authors. Were you reading, Bill Cooper and David Icke stuff in the 90s?
Not in the 90s, but in the early 2000s, like file share and stuff started happening, and you were able to, because man, I had no money like until about 2017. Like I'm talking about like no discernible income, like no career. Like I went job to job. Like I said, a mild substance abuse problem, like not in, like super addictive, but like reasonably expensive. So like all your wages come in and you spend it on food and drink and rent, and you're living in one of the most expensive cities in Europe, in Dublin, through the boom times, and then through the fucking economic crash, on part-time wages. So it's not like I had a bunch of money to buy a bunch of books, but like with file share and stuff, you could find pretty much anything you want online, and that's kind of where I lived, this vicarious avatar type of existence, where I was at, in a room being like, oh yeah, like just taking all the stuff in and not really being able to talk to anybody about it in any great detail. And then putting the show out and finding like, oh, there's a whole global audience for this stuff, which is awesome. Yeah,
that audience has certainly increased over the last few years, I would say. But I'll get to that. You mentioned earlier about interviews. You've interviewed some icons of conspiracy culture, such as David Icke and John McAfee. I've spoken to a few people, such as Ray McGovern and Richard Gage, who've seen and done some remarkable things. Like I said, it's remarkable that they gave me the time of day, given that I'm maybe pushing 5,000 podcast listens. But whereas you're probably well into the millions now, I would guess.
Career downloads is about 45 million, yeah.
Good Lord, yeah. And the John McAfee episode in particular, I remember you seemed almost in awe of how interesting and wild he actually was. Do you find it difficult handling people like that, or?
Well, you have to have a small bit of deference for who they think they are. First of all, I'm not my podcast. Okay, so when we started off doing the podcast, it was just three of us, right? And I was like collating all the information, and I was using my knowledge of the like interconnected topics. Like I made out topics, planned them all out for one episode a week for 5 years, let's say. So it was 250 something episodes, right? All out in seasons. We had little breaks and stuff like that, but it started off just the three of us, and it was going to, the format kind of revealed itself as the years went on, and then later on, like people were dropping out pretty early on. Like Eamon from Monster Fuzz, now he has his own podcast, Monster Fuzz, but Eamon, like after season 1, is like, I can't do this, I'm out. And they're like, okay, bro.
Was that Eamon that was on the Barry Seal episode that you just put out?
No, that's Jerry and Damo. Eamon is the other Wexford guy, the Redness, we call him, Flymo and the Hot Rocks. He's the other
over my head.
He's the other guy from Wexford. He's on he was on all the early episodes anyway. So like the format then, I said, like, for a bit of change, a bit of difference, a bit of crack, to bring in some of my old comedy friends, like just come in, have the chats and crack. So I went through my Rolodex and picked sound people to come, and it kind of grew like that then. So it was me and Paul heading up the regular guest appearances. And then, after a couple of years, Paul wanted to pull back, so got other comedians to come in and eventually padded it out. But I knew, like, it's not going to be sustainable to have a rotation of, say, like 20 dudes forever to keep coming around and talking about rapists and murderers and fucking pedophiles, like forever. Like, they're not going to, like, everybody gets paid now, like, because, between Patreon and ad revenue and stuff like that, like, I think it's a reasonably decent amount of money for the amount of work that's being done, and so it's not like they're coming out and volunteering and doing it for nothing. Like, but I knew that there'd have to be format changes, and also, like, I want to get the information in a different way as well. So, like, I use like an ethnographic research method. So it's basically looking online for a lot of stuff, combing through every single website, discerning the good sources from the bad sources. So these interviews were part of like a plethora of different show styles that I want to do. So the deep dives are the 7-hour long, super, you know, super intricately researched, and kind of like off the beaten path of the topics. Like people that go into listen to an episode, I don't know, about fucking vampires. It was one of the most recent ones. And you think like, yeah, vampires, teeth, blood, you know, immortal, garlic crosses, the whole shit. But I went, all right, what's vampire adjacent that's also conspiracy, you know, conspiracy flavored, and went through told all these stories of where might it have come from. Here's the actual history of like real, you know, like why did they drink blood? What's the benefits of blood drinking and what's the results of it? And go through like shit that you'd be thinking of going, vampires, yeah, I love Twilight. And then you're told about all this fucking just mad shit that like you'd never think. And I think there's like a barrier to adoption for a lot of the listeners, like who are fleecing through these things. Like they type in conspiracy, whatever, and they'll be looking through my back catalog and they're looking at like true crime episodes and going, this fucking, another true crime thing. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't do them shits the same as everybody else. And I have like a whole cohort of people who listen to the true crime ones, and I have a whole lot of cohort of people who listen to the deep dive ones, because they're like, I just want conspiracy, no more true crimes, you know. There's also like a swap cast, which is what we're doing now. I'm going to put this up on our feed and people to listen. So it lets me talk about, you know, shit that imagine if I just made a podcast and I was just telling this stuff. So then I was 15 and I started having nocturnal emissions. It was a hard time for me, like fucking Adrian Moll's diary or some shit. Like, no one to listen to that. But if it's in an interview format where I'm being introduced to your audience, and like I'm able to say, well, I was on with Matthew, we were on the Political Darkside podcast, and we were fucking having chats, like, and people get to, it's like a behind the scenes thing for my audience too. So that's another style I want. The true crime ones, I'm trying to figure out what's going on with those motherfuckers, like who touched their dicks when they were young to make them do that, right? The deep dives then are like, take a topic that I know is like massively interconnected with a load of other different things and take them on a mad journey, you know? And then I have the interview ones, like you said, so I pick like very interesting people and talk to them about either the books that they've written or something that they've had in their conspiracy past, or like John McAfee, who's just like an icon of conspiracy lore. He's not really putting out any content per se. He wasn't really looking for, you know, to promote anything. He was just like, I don't know, I rang him at 10 o'clock. He made a slot to call him at 10 o'clock in the morning, and he was fucking bananas, man. He was absolutely bollocks on the rollover from the night before. He had the sunglasses on. He was drinking straight whiskey and like kind of growling into the microphone because I don't think he can understand some of the questions I was saying to him. Sometimes like, well, let me tell you, kid. Like, what the fuck, John? He's like, yeah, they're coming to get me. I'm in a secret location. And then 20 minutes later, he's like, it's very hot here in Spain. I'm like, don't tell him you're in Spain, John. Right? Like, it's fucking crazy. Like, and then I have these spotlight episodes, because like there's so many different topics that come out from the deep dives. There's just random shit that you remember as you go along, like you're talking, it's in conversation. Like there's a very much a structure to it. I write like 7,000 to 10,000 words of notes for a deep dive episode. Like 10,000 words, that's like half a college thesis, you know? Like it's mad, 100 hours has gone into like putting that shit together, you know? So when we're talking, I'm trying to keep it in the notes, but also keep it in flow. And then we end up talking about, oh, what's that guy, the name with the guy? He did the thing on the stuff. Or you remember something that was adjacent, or you something spark in the room, and you're like, wow, remember this? I watched the documentary, said this thing, but it's not in the notes. I take notes on those things and I want to dive deeper into them. And so I made a spotlight episode type where for 45 or 60 minutes, it'd just be me on my own, going through the information of that, going a little bit deeper into that to put color into the deep dive episodes. But for the interviews, like there's not that many there. I've done a bunch of different swapcasts, a bunch of interviews with podcasters like Greg Carlwood and Austin Fletcher from Fleck's Talks. And then I've done like David Icke was a great interview, but I don't know, like his son didn't really appreciate my treatment of him, and I thought I was pretty respectful, to be fair.
Oh, Gareth, was it?
Yeah, I think it was Gareth that takes me back. There's Gareth and there's Ian. Is it Ian?
I can't remember the other
guy anyway. I think it was him texting me, and so I was interviewing David and was just going like, "What's the crack, man?" You know, and he was like, "Well," with his fucking weird goalie hands, he was like, "Well, I'm immune to ridicule," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm not here to ridicule you. Like, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. Like, did you write 5 books in 6 months?" After you got fucking imbued with knowledge from another dimension while on a mountain in Peru. Is that real, or is that just a brilliant marketing tactic from the early 90s? And he kind of just went off into a diatribe or whatever. And I was like, okay, well, sure, look, you get your answer, And boys texting me afterwards going like, how dare you talk about my dad like that? And I'm like, I don't know what you're fucking talking about, bro. Like, I've nothing but respect for your dad, for the work he's done. But like, sometimes he's kind of full of shit a little bit, and that's allowed. Like, it's, it's not, if you can't take criticism, what the fuck, what kind of game are you in? But I think he listened to the start of the actual episode we did on the history and the analysis of David Icke's work, and there was guests on it that really didn't like David Icke or anything. They were like, oh, he's a shill or whatever, and they were saying some shit. Maybe he heard that and got a bit shirty with me then in the Twitter DMs. But look,
yeah.
It is what it is. But like, when you're talking to people like at that level, sometimes they will hear a question not dissimilar to what I've just done to you, and just go, well, here's my agenda, and I'm going to, like you, I'm trying to tell you the context around that answer that you're trying to give me. So like, basically, if I'm doing an interview with somebody, I'm not trying to handle them. There's a set of information that I want to get from them. But I know that it's a quid pro quo, that if they're coming on my show, they're either promoting a book, promoting a podcast, they have something to sell, they're about to launch some shit, some platform or some shit, and they want to be able to get an audience, and they have a set. It's like a fucking press junket, where they have the lads interviewing people before a movie comes out, and they kind of just do the rounds, so you could watch, and you see guests, like I get fucking emails all the time from guests going, hey, we got this new book coming out, and blah, 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 blah. And I kind of be like, I'll get you when you're cold. I don't want to fucking,
I find, I was interviewing Bart Sibrel, the moon landing guy. I spoke to him the other week, and he'd been on Higher Side Chats and Tinfoil Hat and everything. But like you say, he'll go on, and no matter what the question, not just him, other guests have done it as well, but they'll try and, hit all their talking points regardless of what the question was. So it's like, it's difficult to try and, extract something different from them. Like if you've got different questions that are interesting that you maybe want different answers to, but they'll still like, it's like a politician's answer sometimes, they'll twist the question into exactly how they want to.
It's at that point, it's not an interview, it's public relations, So like, I know if somebody is hammering me with emails going, can I come on the show? I'm like, I'll see you in 8 months when you're cold, and we can talk about what you think about stuff or what you're working on next. Because right now, I'm only going to get a copy paste. So like, I know the cunt is going to end up on Tinfoil Hat, Higher Side Chats, fucking Grey America, Truthzilla, Ripple Effect, like all of them shits, right? And they'll just do the rounds. Not that there's nothing wrong with that. Like all those guys they all have their audiences. But if you're like a fan of that person, let's say it's, I don't know, I don't want to say anybody particularly, but like, I don't know, Graham Hancock, because I know that he doesn't do this, so it's less caustic to accuse somebody who's actually not doing this thing. So Graham Hancock will come on and he has a new book, and he'll go on each one, but he'll go on Joe Rogan. And then he'll go on, all the rest in order hierarchy or whatever. So if you're a Graham Hancock fan, which many people are, by and large, more than likely, you're probably going to listen to the Joe Rogan interview first. Because, it's Joe Rogan. Then you're probably going to go, okay, well, I'd like to hear more from Graham. Let's go on and listen to him on Sam Tripoli's show. And then he's going to have the same shit then on Ricky Brandes on the Ripple Effect. So, like, are you going to listen to 3 of the same thing? Like, if I have him and then you have him, and then fucking Truthzilla has him, and then, Monica Perez has him, like, how many of the same interview are you going to listen to in a row if they're all coming out within 2 weeks of each other? You're only catering into the audience that you have. You're not actually, the whole point of having a guest like that on is to get people who are fans of them who may intersect with your content and go, well, I like them. I like the guy. I like Graham Hancock, and I like the way Gordo handled it. I'm going to listen to more interviews, or I'm going to listen to more episodes by Gordo. But instead, they're after listening to fucking 3 Graham Hancock interviews in 2 weeks, and they're like, I don't care. And you're losing the whole point of it anyway. Like, the whole point of the promotional venture is to have more audience members by getting famous people on who already have their inbuilt audience, and you're cross-pollinating the fucking streams. But if everybody's doing it all at the same time because it's like a press junket, the efficacy of that marketing system fails then, you know? I know I don't listen to fucking 4 in a row of the same dude talking the same shit. And I listen to all these guys all the time, you know?
I'll do that if I have an interview with them lined up, so that I try not to go over the same ground. But like you say, it is difficult. Do you find yourself naturally agreeing with them, for example, David Icke, because of their charisma? I mean, I ask that because my impression of you is that you're, like you said earlier, you're an impartial observer until maybe the last couple of years, but we'll get to that. But your style's certainly analytical, read all the source material, take each topic on its merit. But yeah, particularly with David Icke, and then this is perhaps appropriate given that we're just after the Jubilee. I mean, you know, how easy was it to speak to him without going, yeah, everyone's a reptile sort of thing?
Like, I do have my own opinions, but there's also like the appeal to authority that may be considered a logical fallacy. But if you're talking about somebody like David Icke, who has an encyclopedic knowledge of this kind of stuff, I did find that he was, that particular interview, which is from 2016 as well, man, you know, it's a long time ago. I was a much different guy as well, and the show wasn't as popular back then, and I thought like, oh fuck, this is a privilege, like you better not piss him off too much. But there was a few things he was saying and a few things he said in the past, and I was like, so come here, listen, this thing. And he was like, fucking tangent answer, don't really deal with the topic. And I'm like, yeah, right, but what about this thing though? I'm not fucking, you know, Jon Snow. I'm not like, you know, grilling these motherfuckers, but I'm also not like sycophantically agreeing with them. I do find that if you're getting people on and there's a quid pro quo where you don't want them to bounce and just go, this interview is over, and leave, it's very hard to put aside your personal biases or what information you have already researched before you start talking to them. Like someone, like I said, if it's a press junket type interview, you're not going to get those meaningful answers. I feel, and I from what I've listened to of other people's podcast, like I've reasonable, you know, proof that that's the case, you know. So like one hilarious example of somebody not giving in was when Greg Carlwood was interviewing Stephen Greer. Oh yeah, do you remember that episode?
Yeah.
And Greg was just
he wasn't
like,
happy with that.
Wasn't fucking happy at all. And Greg just wouldn't move on. He just wouldn't let it go and move on. He was like, no, but Stephen, this. And Stephen Greer is like, what do you mean by this? What are you doing? What are you doing here? What is this? And Greg is like, well, this thing. Like, if you want it to be a thing, why are you charging this much money? There. This is inappropriate. Greg, this is, come on now. And he's like, so, and he just fucking held his feet to the fire. And I think it was a good like 8 or 9 minutes of cringe, like arse puckering cringe deliciousness. And then he went, okay, this. And I think that the interview went on for 15 more minutes, and Stephen was very anxious by the end of it. He was like, yeah, no, yeah, okay, is that enough? Bye. Like, if you want to make an entertaining show and you want to get somebody to tell what they feel and think in a conversational manner, rather than like getting them to repeat again the PR notion or do a paraphrasing of some of the information from their book, which happens a lot when there's somebody who has tell me in chapter 4 you said this, and then they just summarize like 90 pages of chapter 4 into like a 4 or 5 minute kind of synopsis. But to get a true real answer, you have to first of all be a good interview enough to have questions that nobody else has asked before, right? But if they don't want to answer them because they're on the press junket, you won't get the answer anyway. Like, it's a fucking crazy, it's a crazy way of going on. And I think like podcasting as a business didn't used to suffer from that because there was too few people doing that stuff. But now, dollar signs like Spotify, Apple, Acast, iHeartRadio, all these big companies have weighed in now, and there's big dollars like being thrown around, so they know that there's ears on. YouTube is on the decline, like pretty much on the decline for that type of new material, and podcasting is fresh green fields. So obviously people are going to go, right, in our marketing strategy for this next movie, book, TV show, film, whatever, we have going on, we got to put podcasting into the mix. So we have to have a list of the podcasts that are in that genre, the people who got, they do pre-interviews and it's all become very corporate rather than the cottage industry that it used to be. And if you're trying to like not agree with somebody to be controversial, I've seen some interviewers come in and they just kind of take the piss and they only get a 20-minute interview because lads like, I'm fucking out of here. What the fuck is wrong with you? What's your man's name? Krishnan Murthy interviewing Robert Downey Jr. and he was asked about drug and alcohol addiction, and Robert Downey Jr. went, are you going to do that to me? Yeah. He's like, I was just asking. So I'll give you one more chance. You want to keep going? You want to ask something else? It's like, well, I mean, you were in jail. He's like, okay, the interview's over. And he's like, what? You're like, no, son, you can't fucking do that shit. You done it to Michael Jackson. You done it to Quentin Tarantino. You can't do that shit and then make a sensationalization of it. Like podcasters can't get that kind of clout, so you have to kind of give them enough rope to hang themselves with.
You have to be deferential. I mean, I always offer my guests the opportunity to see roughly the kind of questions I'm going to be asking them, and then it's on them. If I say something that they don't like, but generally I'm very polite anyway, so nothing's gone south as of yet.
Yeah, so, but I mean, if you like, that's not part of your bag. Like, you're not an investigative journalist. You're just like a guy who wants to get people's opinions, and you can do like a suffix at the end of the episode, like a little kind of tag on going, whoa, that was crazy. Who knew that he would talk about the Jews for so long? Anyway, this is Political Darkside. Follow us on Twitter, and this kind of thing. So like, and I've heard them on like to my mind, the top like the 5-star, gold medal conspiracy theory interviewer is Greg Carwood. I think he has the greatest guests. He does the greatest interviews, greatest intros. He really does the work as regards like research and looking up like the subject matter, and you'd be surprised, man, how many podcasters get authors on, and the authors want to promote their book, and the cunts don't even read the book, like, and start talking to them, like, happens a lot. And
I don't see the point in that, because when they start speaking, you're not going to know what they've actually done, so
of course,
or what they actually think.
Well, so it happens as well. Like, there's especially in the conspiracy space, you get lads coming on doing shows about topics that it's very evident within the first few minutes they don't really know a lot about, and that's okay if you're there for the crack. But if you're there for information, like I try to provide info, and maybe stuff that somebody else wouldn't have been able to recognize by searching around themselves. Like most conspiracy theorists now are kind of reduced to like the research skills and methods of other conspiracy theory podcasts or YouTubers. A lot of websites have been taken down. A lot of stuff like, bibliocopedias and these kind of websites are getting pages removed for whatever reasons. You have forums like Above Top Secret and stuff like that where people are sharing, and then you have like the subreddits, which are consistently I guess trolled by bad actors, possibly government agents, or at least like paid informational adversaries, throwing in like red herrings and throwing in links and trying to make people look like right wing and white supremacist and all these kind of buzzwords. Mm-hmm. But like, it's very hard to have a genuine reaction from somebody when they have a job to do in selling a book or selling a movie or promoting their own podcast. But like, most of the time you get an honest answer. Like, I'm being really honest and maybe talking out of school for some of this stuff, but like, I think about this shit all the time. It's not just conspiracy theories. Like, I looked up for hours and hours and hours, like the podcast business. I listen to other people's stuff, to find out, to gauge the temperature of where I am in the space, like what are other people doing. And then I consume an awful lot of video content through like YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, Rockfin. Like I consume all of that stuff as well from all these other creators. And like the tides are changing on a lot of that information, how you get it, where you get it from. And like, if you're going to be skimming over the surface only for conspiracy theory stuff nowadays, like you're doing yourself and your audience a disservice,
Yeah, well, certainly yourself and the likes of Greg Carwood are probably in like this privileged position in as much as, people have an interest in this sort of thing, but they don't have the time to go and do the reading and writing, looking up for themselves. So they kind of almost take your word for, here's where you should be looking for some interesting information. Here's the facts. You've done the research, so they don't have to, sort of thing. And it's to an extent, it's if you look over the last few years, it's probably that we've gone from all of us being observers and consumers of like conspiratainment to now becoming like active participants or the subjects of the conspiracies ourselves, which is kind of strange. I mean, within the conspiracy community, there's certainly been warnings of, shady organizations curbing rights and freedoms, digital monitoring. You'll own nothing and be happy.
Yeah,
your own personal bugbear, like cultural Marxism, that sort of thing. It seems like COVID's come along and, suddenly the conspiracy is real. It's in our faces in real time.
We are part of it.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel like the fun and games of conspiracy theories have stopped and, shit's got real? Because you kind of alluded to that in the Glasgow live show about George Orwell.
Well, really, Matthew, like the shit was always real. I don't mean when I say like, I know you mean when the shit's got real, like you mean like they're starting to affect us now. I just think that, like that Jordan Peterson quote, when he's saying like, tyranny, it's a tremendous threat. And if you cooperate and let them move you, if they say move and you're not willing to move, and they make you go back 3 millimeters and 3 millimeters again, and if you're willing to move back, all of a sudden you're 3 miles behind. You're wondering what the bloody hell happened. Like if you're willing
That's him, yeah.
if you're willing to let them take those 3 millimeters at a time, and we're just at a point now where we're all able to look up and see how far we've moved, how many portions of 3 millimeters we've given away over the last 6 or 7 years. I think from 2016, people started to feel it. I think Trump's election and that tearing, that dichotomizing of American society, because let's face it, like the whole world is America, really. We're all just a reflection thereof. I know Britain likes to be British, England likes to be English, but really it's just like a kind of a original flavor American. Let's, all the media, all of the industry, the news media, like everything is a homogenization of Western culture. So you can say westernized is Americanized. That's probably a pretty broad stroke, and people would argue with me on that, but like, Douglas Murray talks about that stuff. It's like a homogenization of culture, right? And when that culture is ripped in half by something like an accusation of being a basket of deplorables, or the false equivalency of supporting a populist non-establishment president, this false equivocation of supporting him and being like a Nazi or a fascist or a racist or a white supremacist. These are all like historically, famously well-known Saul Alinsky methods of disruption, nihilism, and fascism. In fact, this enantiodromic accusation of you are what I say you are, when in fact I am that. you know, one rule for thee and another for me. So like the left ended up calling everybody who supported Trump a fascist, when in fact they were the ones who were acting, behaving and planning like fascists, you know. Identity politics, to some extent critical race theory, intersectionality, the broad forcing of the acceptance of fringe organizations, fringe movements, all back then split society, you know, split families apart, made people like kind of question their reality, going like, well, I don't believe in that. Does that mean I have to believe in this thing? Oh fuck, am I a racist? And a lot of people weren't prepared for that type of psychological onslaught. So they ended up getting angry, you know. And I think that now, like, it's not worse than ever. It's the same amount of bad, but it's just that there's a very tangible recent history that we can now look back on. Whereas before, history was deleted. Like, look, in 1939 when the war kicked off, everybody was like, oh shit. And the people who were paying attention knew that shit was going to happen since 1933. People who were really paying attention knew that shit was going to happen since 1924. And then in 1941, late 1941, when Pearl Harbor happened, everybody was like, oh, is America going to join the war now? You know, when the people who watched, who knew about 24 and 33, when those shits were signed, they knew that, like, yeah, sure, America was always going to join the war. They were just looking for an excuse. And then when it was all over, they were looking back going, phew, imagine. Huh. Do you remember what it was like in the 30s? No, I've been traumatized from the last 6 years of, like, propaganda, war, you know, financial collapse and ruin, death, destruction, fear, propaganda. So it's very hard to look back on that recent past and analyze it with any level of, you know, unemotional accuracy. Like there's definitely like an emotive aspect to all of this stuff. And now it's a repeat of that 80 years later, 90 years later, where they're using 24-hour news cycle media to propagandize and evoke emotional responses to make you forget about the very recent past, which is a typical symptom of psychological trauma. You know, you're fucking up your memories. It's a method of social gaslighting, where they're basically going like, hey man, didn't this happen before, like only a year ago? No, it didn't. What are you talking about? Who are you? What the fuck? And people are looking up stuff on the internet, shit's happening that was on the news, and then 3 days later it says, here's a thing that never happened. You're like, oh, you remember that happening? No, you don't. So people are starting to feel those things, and because they're happening so much closer together, it's like a wave function, you know, where it starts off big and then starts like whoa, 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 and we're in a very fine hum of corruption, hypocrisy, technocratic, oligarchical monopolies, bald-faced lies, the loss of freedoms, violence, daily crime and violence that people are being subjected to, personal freedoms being lost, loss of movement, and all the stuff that happened with COVID over the last 2 years. Like, that's really bringing it to the fore. But it's nothing new, Matthew. It's nothing that we've never seen before. And you were there when I was talking about Orwell in Glasgow. I kind of refined that show, bringing it to Liverpool and then Birmingham and then Newcastle. But, like, he wrote that shit 110 years ago, some of that shit, you know? 1984 was written in 1948. Like, that's fucking 90 years ago nearly, do you know? And it's the same shit. It's the same blueprint, because people are the same all over. History may not repeat, but it definitely rhymes. And these are the tactics to take over a population that have been used time and again. And this is just the time. And it's again from 90 years ago, around wartime. Like, we're facing down, if you listened to the live show from Manchester, from London, I talked about the book The Fourth Turning by Neil Howe. Like, we're at that point now where there is war, you know? I stood on the stage in Manchester and went, there's war coming, lads, probably going to be Ukraine. And then, like, 5 months later, Putin's marching into Donetsk and Luhansk, like, you know. I'm not a soothsayer, I'm not a prognosticator, but like, where else is going to be a war? It was that, or it was going to be some shit in Iran or Syria, do you know? Or Yemen was probably going to like rise up. But whoever was most beneficial to the Americans to make into a proxy war puppet, that was where it was going to be. And Ukraine was probably set up since 2014 to be that. As well as the fact that like Biden winning the presidency, which hadn't happened at the time I was doing the Manchester show and this kind of stuff, so you wouldn't know. But if I had known Biden's going to be the president, I would have put all my fucking money on Ukraine in Paddy Power, because like he has rakes of money there, and so does Pelosi, and so does John Kerry, and so does George W., and so does the fucking Clintons, and rakes of cunts have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars all wrapped up in Ukraine. So of course the war was going to be there. So like, to answer your question, you know, it's not happening more so now. It's just more people are able to see it. There's way more conspiracy theory content producers because it's podcasting is making money. People are interested in this kind of stuff. I fucking railed on Russell Brand for being a flip-flopper. Like, who the fuck? Russell Brand is now like the top conspiracy guy, and he's allowed to talk about all this shit on YouTube without getting kicked off. Fuck that cunt. Where the fuck was he for the last 10 years? Like, fucking polishing his nips, interviewing fucking Lily Allen or some shit. Like, what the fuck are you talking about, you cunt? And we were all...
my mum here, she's well into him.
Oh, of course she is. Your man wants a bit of Russell Brand's fucking shiny rod.
Good like, Lord. She's not listening to this episode.
he's a good looking man. But let your man have sex with Russell Brand, but just don't make her listen to him. Like, I don't know what the fuck. How is he allowed to say that shit? And we all got kicked off of YouTube for the last 2 years for saying that, and might still, and still get put off of Instagram for it.
You think it's like a Joe Rogan phenomenon in as much as because he's so popular, they can't now chuck him off?
No, of course they can chuck him off. Sure, fucking how popular was Alex Jones? How popular is fucking David Icke? Like, those motherfuckers had millions, and they still kicked him off. But Russell Brand seems to get a pass. And all he does now is talk about, oh, Fauci, oh, this, oh, that, oh, Bill Gates, oh, his video titles are all like, wow, you'll never believe this. It's like fucking 2014 YouTube clickbait. Like, it's like,
yeah, it's a Politico article or something every time.
He's reading political articles, sure. And I mean, you know, it's not him. It's somebody collating a farm and go, here, read this out, Russell, and we get 800,000 clicks in 2 days. Like, grand, do your business. It's all good. But like, pinch of salt, like fistful of salt with that cunt, because he wasn't there when we were all doing this shit. Like, why is Alex Jones not allowed back on YouTube now that, you know, all the court cases are all set? Like, why is David Icke not allowed back on when the shit that he was accusing, he was getting kicked off YouTube for saying that it was a fucking lab leak, which is now almost definitely true. Like, why is he not allowed back on YouTube then in that case? Do you know? It doesn't make any motherfucking sense. So to answer your question, I think it's not because there's more stuff happening or it's the end of the world any more than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's just like now the crescendo of information, the personal experiences of people, because people were, and I think COVID was a big massive part of that people were kind of like left with the time to sit around and look. People were at home behaving like students who had fuck all to do, only smoke drugs and watch stuff on YouTube, except they didn't have the drugs. They were just like, it was jammy time for like 2 years. They were on furlough, and they had the space and they had the time to breathe, and they weren't stuck in traffic, and they weren't sitting in an office listening to some piped in radio shit, smelling Carol's fucking fish stew from the microwave, being like, oh, Carol, you fucking dirty bitch. Like, having to fucking smell other people's farts and listening to old Windows 2000 fucking computers, like getting some fucking, you know, office PTSD. They're at home in their Jimmy Jams with the fucking mouse moving like Homer Simpson. Remember when he had the water bird?
The bird just tapped.
Yeah, just tapping the thing. People had them shits. Like, there was apps that came out to be like, move your mouse once every 20 seconds so you'll remain on green lights on Microsoft Teams. So you can basically DOS off and watch fucking Tiger King on the telly and no one could tell you what to do. Like, people got a bit of fucking space, man. They got a bit of space, a bit of time to think, and they also got treated really badly. And that's all it takes, man. It's a small bit of time to think. It usually happens in like depressions and recessions, when people are out of work and they're at home, or they're down the pub, or they're at home drinking, and 5 men all sitting around going, I've no work. Have you got work? No, I don't. They're after closing the mine. I know. You know what we should do? We should have a protest. That Margaret Thatcher's not going to get away with this. Like, you know, doing some shit like that. Like, fucking, hey, oh, any work, any jobs? Come on, let's go down to Workman's Club and have a chat. Have a pint of Tetley's. And they're all down fucking having a Tetley's and talking about going, Bagum, you know what we should do? We should get all the people together and paint a couple of signs, go down to Parliament, have a protest, you know, doing all this shit. Of course, any bit of time, any bit of fucking space away from the rat race is going to give people the impetus to fucking push back against the regime that's putting them there in the first place. And
I suppose with Russell Brand, you can actually see through the lens of what he's doing, you can almost see like them weaponizing conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Which was essentially, you know, if you take the QAnon phenomenon, which you could probably say that ultimately leads to January the 6th. That's quite an interesting thing to look at, in as much as like QAnon, you know, it does drag a lot of people who are interested in politics into the conspiracy theory way of thinking, but it kind of ferries them in such a way that it wasn't necessarily what they should be thinking. I hesitate to say what they should be thinking.
Sure,
obviously.
I know what you mean, though.
But it was as if it was trying to wind them up in such a way, make them believe X, Y, and Z. But equally, I often have this conversation with myself in as much as I'm kind of all for anything that gets people to start thinking. So, which is kind of why, like, I'll give Russell Brand the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly. I'm saying, look, he has 5.7 million subscribers. Even if he's just turning on like a few people onto this stuff and they're watching him going, Russell Brand was like fucking sucking Katy Perry's tits a few years ago, and now he's like calling out Dr. Fauci for shit that he's actually doing with real like articles and shit like that. And, you know, hands up, I have to say, okay, fair enough. The thing I'm a small bit salty about is that he gets to talk about that shit and not get kicked off YouTube. And if any other cunt was doing it, they'd be put off, like, and have been in the past, and people don't get reinstated. Do you know? Like, I got put off of Vimeo for shit that Russell Brand is able to have videos on there talking about the exact same shit in the exact same way. And maybe it's a bit of like personal resentment, which comes from a place of envy. And I'm like, I'm raging that Russell Brand can say the shit. Like, I feel disempowered, you know, as a conspiracy theorist. I feel like I have to be a little bit more careful in order to maintain a presence online. Like, if you go too hard, if you say what you actually think and feel and mean, it could get spicy. And all it takes is for two cons to come together in an office and go, come here, did you see that thing? Yeah, I saw that thing. And there's an investigate, and it's like, boom, here's all your fucking community guidelines, 3 in a row, bang, you're gone. Like, it can happen overnight, and there's a fear there of that. And yet, Russell Brand can do all that stuff, and you're kind of like, like back in the day, you know, it's like there's a bunch of, you know, drug dealers around the town, and one kid has all the drugs and he gets lifted and brought to the cop shop, and then he's like, that afternoon he's out walking about, and you're like, why? Then
the other lads get arrested,
and then everyone else starts getting arrested, and you're like, what the fuck happened there? You know, like Russell Brand is that guy that got caught. I feel, and he's allowed somehow to do that. Anyway, I don't want to fucking take up any more of my life talking about Russell Brand. Fuck the cunt. Like, he's grand. He's there turning on people at a lower level. He's turning on people from 0 to 1, and that's fine. You know.
Yeah, it's a start. It's a building block.
Yeah.
With the conspiracy community has kind of been consumed into right-wing politics to an extent. I mean, certainly in America, again with the using QAnon as an example.
Yeah.
You spoke to the guy, I forget his name, but he went by the moniker of Praying Medic.
Yeah.
Who you best describe as like a translator for the QAnon material. What's your did you follow it during? No.
I followed the you know, the headlines, the bare bones. I followed it as a narrative. I definitely wasn't a believer, still amn't. I'm not a believer of it. I don't think it has like a lot of merit. There are some things that are evident, but they were evident as it went along anyway, if you were watching from a different perspective. And now with the Russiagate thing and all the Hillary Clinton, the Durham report and all that kind of stuff coming out, it does look like, with hindsight, that some of the Q stuff was there and it was called out. What I think Q was a very cleverly constructed psyop for Christian conspiracy theorists, right? So it had all the hallmarks of vilifying the enemy. So Republican conservative Christian conspiracy theorists. That it vilified the enemy, which is the Democrats or Hillary Clinton or whoever. You put whoever in that cohort, or the FBI, like Peter Strzok and all these guys, or his little fucking smiley, him and Bruce Orr and all that fucking Steele dossier crowd, you take Hillary Clinton, who was like, cunt numero uno, in 2016 and beyond. So a lot of the information was about that kind of stuff. They had Hunter Biden laptop information in there. They had Joe Biden stuff. They had Obama stuff. There's a lot of information in Q, and there's like Q drops that you can look at. But it's kind of that Nostradamus effect where it's intentionally vague, and now that has been borne out over time. It has that that Marshall Applewhite vibes, the Heaven's Gate kind of like, the end of the world is the 21st of May. And then the 21st of May comes on, it's like, I read it wrong. It's actually the 1st of October. And then October comes on, it's like, actually, it's February. Sorry, read it wrong. I read the numbers the other way around. It's February. And you just keep stringing the cunts along for 4 years until Trump is gone. And then you have January 6th as a full stop to that operation. And then no one's allowed to talk about Q anymore. So, like, if you look at it from, like, far back, it could be a fucking honeypot created by the CIA and the FBI together to be able to entrap a bunch of right-wing conservative Christians with the concept of a digital conspiracy messiah whose identity remains a mystery, possibly is JFK Jr., who was supposed to be dead, who would resurrect and reappear on the streets of Dallas in like November 2020 before the election and declare, I know everything and I've been secretly, behind the scenes the whole time, like fucking Jesus pushes the rock back and, this kind of thing.
I think there's an element of it being, if it was designed to wind people up and, bring people into like the conspiracy thinking to an extent, and then also just disappearing and ending in disappointment or ending in January the 6th, it might have been almost like had a nihilistic goal, in as much as like, people voted for Trump, people voted for Brexit, people were getting along the lines of non-conformity is probably the best way of putting it. So they had to create something to give people the additional hope. Yeah, give them the hope that, actually we can overturn the establishment. We can go all the way with this and get rid of the people that are perceived as the enemies. And then, you think they're making progress. Here comes January the 6th. The election's been stolen. We're going to overturn it and X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And then just push nothing. So all these people who had bought into it, it is just that, it was a conspiracy theory all along. You had nothing. All you've got left is a void. But
go a level deeper.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a honeypot made by the CIA and the FBI collaboratively to, identify, coax out, entrap the most active political proponents and supporters of Trump, the people who would actually travel to Washington D.C., people who would act rather than just be behind a keyboard, people who would actually do some shit. It was a great way to identify them. And sure, all they did was have fucking thousands of people in Washington, D.C., and they were just out taking pictures of every cunt. So they have pictures of everybody. They were flying drones over the crowd. They had people, they had agents all up and down the lines with zoom lenses taking pictures of people, just going, click, there's 40 lads, click, there's another 40 lads, click, you guys are all on the register. And then they went through all the facial recognition software, and they recognized everybody, put it into the driver's license database, and found out, right, they were there. And how many people lost their jobs? How many people got fined? How many people got arrested? The lads who were actually in the chamber or whatever, they've been kept in solitary confinement. That's war crime shit, for something that they claim is an insurrection. I don't believe it to be so. The January 6th Commission and stuff show that like they were let in, police opened the doors and stuff like that. It stinks to high heaven to me as a conspiracy theorist of like an operation that started at the minute that Trump took office, and they thought Trump was the one that was doing all the drops, like that he was the man because he was calling out stuff like 17, and he was like making Q signs and all, and he says like, there's a storm coming, okay, the storm is coming, and the boys took that on as a fucking a motto or whatever, you know. So like, think about it, they're giving you out secret like secret passages or what do the Christians call them, tracts, you know, secret like paragraphs of information to be deciphered, like the Bible is. Like, you look at the Bible and there's a whole load of like room for interpretation. So they have this, lo and behold, HC on the 4th of January shall, you know, permit BL to do the blah blah blah, and they're like, and the HC could be Hillary Clinton, you know, all this kind of stuff. And it gave them enough room to speculate and be able to talk amongst each other and go, well, I think it means this. Well, I think it means this. Like, it was very cleverly constructed to get people to be busying themselves. So basically, for 4 years, they kept all these motherfuckers busy. They also kept them benign because they said, like, anyone who could actually do anything, like, you know, do what the left are doing, which is like political action, getting together, making residents association or you know, town and city council, preparing local government, doing all this stuff. What Q did was like placate all those people who believed in it, made them believe that there was some messiah coming at the end that was going to cure all. It was going to be Mike Pence will finally crack, please God willing, with the blessings of Jesus, and he'll sign the thing to make it so that Biden and Trump will remain president forever. Way, like, that's literally what they had faith for, instead of for the 4 years of reading and trying to waste their time at night time trying to fucking decipher all these Q posts. They could have been going like, okay, right, who do we elect into local government, and having town meetings and doing all actual like political action work. Instead, they were fucking spending their time at home trying to decipher fucking cryptic you know, Q drops in between like long luxurious wanks. Do you know what I mean? Like, it took advantage of their natural proclivities, which was to have faith in some kind of a messiah that was going to come and die for our sins and save us all. The interpretation of like secretive scriptures, the faith that their leader would be able to overcome all the odds with the blessings of God for America, like patriotism and justice will prevail and all that, blah 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 blah. And then to end the whole thing, they all got their fucking picture taken as being part of this quote unquote like racist white supremacist cult. And now it's like you're not even allowed to talk about it online, or you get fucking kicked off of Twitter and Instagram and possibly YouTube. So like, more fool them. Sorry to all the Q fans out there, like, but it kind of seems like you got diddled. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of where I've landed on as an opinion of the whole situation. With the January the 6th thing, though, it is odd in as much as it certainly isn't what it's been portrayed as. You know, it's like, oh, it's this violent insurrection. I mean, the violent insurrection by the people that it is claimed who did it, if it's what they were doing, they probably would have turned up with all the guns that they have and actually did it. But they didn't. They just turned up, walked around, took a few photos. Yes, it kicked off in certain parts, but like, as was it Kamala Harris who said it's the worst day in American history since Pearl Harbor, and it's like there's plenty that's happened in between there.
Forget 9/11, bitch.
That, and you know, number of things.
What about the hundreds of millions of dollars of damage that was done to towns and cities in Michigan, in fucking Washington State, Seattle, and Portland, and California? Hundreds of millions of dollars of damage in California and New York, and like, you know, the improprieties in the accounts of the Black Lives Matter organizers buying fucking mansions and real estate and all this kind of stuff. Like, all of the hundreds of millions of damage, news reporters standing in front of businesses on fire, black owned businesses up in flames, like 40-50 foot high flames, going, this is a mostly peaceful protest. And then you have a few fucking lads wearing American flags walking in between the fucking red ropes in the Capitol building, going, like a fucking school tour, you know. What's that documentary? Fucking One Day at the Capitol or something. It's called.
I've not watched it. I think I'll just be upset watching it, to be honest.
Apparently, they took all of the most salacious, like, what's it called? Not The Truth About January 6th. What's it called? There's one documentary. I don't know what it's
I think
called.
it's on Skybox at the minute.
Is it? Yeah. There's some shit anyway. The Capitol Riot documentary is what's it called. 4 Hours at the Capitol. Yeah, that's it. So you watch that 4 Hours at the Capitol, and it's like the most salacious, emotionally manipulative, like inauthentically represented footage, because it's cunts with a GoPro like in the back of being jostled around in the crowd. But if you just pull it back a small bit, it's just a load of lads walking quite slowly and peacefully into an open door that was opened by police. Like, it's all just point of view counter propaganda. And of course they're going to do that, man. And if fucking Trump is going to run again in 2024, they've ran out of pussies that he's grabbed. So what are they going to fucking throw out, like January 6th footage, and go, do you want this to happen again? If he becomes president, he'll never give up presidency, just like his friend Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin, his bestie mate. Like, of course he's got, you know, it's a fucking long game.
It feels like there's, like, people certainly, like, there's two separate realities that people have now, like, settled into.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's probably, you know, like you say, there's every chance Trump will run again. It's almost like not necessarily an Alex Jones talking point, but it does feel like everything's just been stirred up towards... there's no reconciliation anywhere that I can see. Like, certainly with the January 6th hearings, it's just total nonsense whilst people are, you know, genuinely struggling with the inflation and the economic crisis and everything. And they're just doing all this theatre nonsense that's... they're not serving anyone. They're not helping anybody.
They are, but in a way that's more emotionally satisfying than physical or pragmatic. And if you're able to satisfy the emotional needs and be able to manipulate people into cooperation, like, if you're really, really angry, you'll forget about being really, really hungry. Do you know what I mean? And
possibly
as we go on, yeah. Well, shit, man. You know, like. Sometimes hunger makes people angry, but like they'll still go to war even though they've no food. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how many countries in famine that ended up with ethnic cleansing and with fucking brother against brother, like all this fucking civil war talk. Like, what did they say? Any developed country in the world is about 9 meals away from total chaos.
Yeah.
You know, if you deny
human nature and whatnot.
Yeah, of course, man. You're teetering on the purge. And that's why I believe that's why there's this massive push now against taking on the guns again. Like, when have you ever, like, we got a break there from all the school shootings and all of the stuff when there was Donald Trump as the president, and now the same old shit again is back to fucking shooting people up and blaming guns and trying to take the guns off people. Like, none of that was happening for the last 4 years.
I said this to my friends just before the Jubilee celebration, but I made the point of saying we can guarantee this will go off without any sort of, you know, terrorism or anything like that. And sure enough, 3 days later in Berlin, somebody's like driving a vehicle through a load of people and everything. It's like, well, that went quite, you know, if you're actually an Islamic extremist terrorist and you hate the West, what better target than the Jubilee? But no, nothing. Just without a hitch, perfect. And here comes terrorism again.
Well,
it's like it winds it up when it's required.
I think that's because they spent £2 billion on the Jubilee, and they needed it to go off without a hitch because they want to raise the spirits of the UK, because the government are going to be thrown out in their hole for the massive amounts of hypocrisy and the Christmas parties and all this kind of shit. People are mad.
I'm not sure that it's possible though, in as much as, like, I think again with January 6th, I think it's precisely because there isn't a relief valve within the actual framework of the political systems that I don't know how, like, people are mad, but how are they actually practically going to get rid of this government?
how are they going to get
situation.
satisfaction? Like one side is going to be mad if the other side are in power, and there's no resolution. There's no like coming together as a country. So
I don't see Starmer being a solution to the problem of the current government. So I mean, where is the release valve? Certainly in British politics, there isn't one. In the same as there isn't in American politics.
in American politics, yeah, same. Like, if Republicans get back in, the Democrats will be like, wah. If the Democrats stay in power, the Republicans will be like, ba-boom. Like, that's the problem with a dual party system. That you'll end up with those stalemates, those impasses, and usually that shit results in civil war, which has happened in the past, where there's an unimpeachably concrete belief in one party or the other, whoever's in charge, that can't be overcome, and it has to be overthrown by military might, and then only after a military, insurrection or a rebellion or a civil war do the losing side then concede that immovable policy, and they go, yeah, all right then, stop killing us, okay. Like the Democrats were pro-racism, and then there was a civil war, and then they were like, okay, go on then, fuck's sake. Go on then. And then it was fine, and they could go back to being, whatever, secretly racist. Bringing back the Ku Klux Klan. It's like, oh, well, if we can't do it, legally, we'll just do it at nighttime in bed sheets. But like,
they barely even secretly do it though. Who was the senator that Joe Biden used to hang around with, who was in the Klan again? What was his name?
I can't remember the name now.
When he basically says like, "Oh, I went to a couple of meetings and then realized it wasn't for me," but at the same time, he became like a grand cyclops.
Yeah.
Byrd, Senator Byrd, that was it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, certainly with Biden, do you believe that he got that many votes? Really?
Well, see, that's another one of those things you're not allowed to say. It's one of these things that if you put up even a supposition about it on Instagram and say, did Joe Biden get 81 million votes? And then just show like a video of him falling off his bike. Like,
doing the meme.
Yeah, the whole thing. I saw a brilliant meme about it where Joe Rogan is interviewing him on the ground. Remember? It was over Conor McGregor at the start. So funny, man. But like Joe Biden's a fucking porridge head, man. Like, he's too old. He was too old at the time. There's no way that he got more votes than Trump.
Did you watch 2000 Mules? That documentary. Yeah.
It's like there's loads of evidence there to say that there was at least some tampering, and like they showed the live hacking of the voting machines and stuff like that. It's so simple to do, and sure, it's being done the whole time. And what's mad is that the American government help other countries to do that, and it's quite publicly known and easily investigatable that they've done that in the past. South American countries like rigging their elections and stuff like that, CIA overseas.
Ukraine as well.
Ukraine, obviously. Come on, obviously as well. And but when they do it at home, like it's all, no, I didn't. This kind of thing.
It's impossible. No way.
No way.
The most secure election ever.
Like being real about it. Trump was hated so much that quite possibly it activated a bunch of previously kind of silent or unvoting or unmotivated voters on the Democrat side to go like, okay, well, fuck, we can't let Trump have it again, and come out and vote, But Trump got so many votes in that 2020 election that he beat the previous record of votes by, I think,
Obama's record,
7 million, which was Barack Obama in the first election, 2008, and like Trump bet it by 7 million. And then Biden bet that by 4 million more. So, like, can the hatred for Donald Trump motivate 14 million out of a population of 400 million, where it's estimated that 90-something million are either not eligible or not registered to vote? So out of a potential voting base of 300 million, where usually the voting turnout is approximately 30%. So you're talking about 100 million. So of 100 million usual voters, that Donald Trump got 77 million and Joe Biden got 81 million. So you have 150. So you had 50 million more voters come out, and 14 million of them had never voted before and came out and voted for Biden that they'd already voted for Obama in 2008, Democratic voters. Like, that shit don't make no more fucking sense. Like, do you know?
No.
Like, the appeal that Trump had to all the Midwestern states and basically all, like, everywhere except for California and New York. It was all set of gerrymandering. I remember watching so intently at the time, and you know, the counties in Arizona, Michigan, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Michigan, Arizona,
Georgia as well,
Georgia, Pennsylvania. They were all like very much in question. And then you have like the videos that came out of the people pulling out boxes of ballots, and you had like the for the first time because of COVID, all the mail-in shit. Like, it was just so much shenanigans going on, right? But realistically, you have to hold up your hands and say, yeah, possibly they could, like, the hatred for Trump could have activated a bunch of people to get registered and go and vote for Biden just to get Trump out. That's totally realistic. But there's enough information, there's enough like factual data there to at least trigger an inspection into voter fraud.
It's the lack of inspection that,
yeah.
I mean, any impartial bystander must surely go, right, we should probably have a look at this and at least work out what is going on. But it's just, you put the TV on and it's just the false claim that the election was stolen, the big lie, etc. And it's like, well, isn't there a middle ground here where we can go, well, maybe we should have a look?
But now even you're not allowed to talk to, with 2 years of history behind us and loads of investigations and documentaries being made and stuff like that, you're still not allowed to put up any, like I think it's tantamount to, like, not terrorism, but like online harassment or something like that they'll put you on the terms and conditions of, like, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, where you're not allowed to question any electoral results. That's part of the terms and conditions, that you're not allowed to put into question for fear of stoking the fires of violent insurrection because of January 6th, which is also kind of fake. The election is kind of fake. It seems like that whole set of things was set up to take over, And
yeah, but going back to what you were saying earlier, with that in mind, why would people then, instead of looking at, QAnon stuff, why would they waste their time trying to participate in the politics, knowing that, or thinking that it was nothing that they could do because it would be fixed anyway?
But that's the thing.
Problem.
That's the thing. Like, the QAnon did that in quite a big way. Like, it deactivated the conscientious Republican voter by going, like, just relax, have faith. Like, it's going to be a fake election. You're not going to get it anywhere. There's no need to go and vote. Like, you don't have to. Biden can't win by virtue of the Lord or God and stuff like that. So it kept a lot of people at home as well. Like, it's the whole thing. I mean, we look back on this in 30 years, man. They'd be teaching this shit to kids in school the way that fucking Hitler did it in the 30s, like, took over the beer hall putsch and all this kind of stuff that we now know. Like, you say, oh, they're having the beer hall putsch, and it's like, the context of it, like how important that was and how he took over the National Socialist Party, and then, worked his way up through the ranks, started small, usurped the leadership, took over, fucking signed in a all power forever, decree in 1933, and then the next thing he's fucking annexing parts of Czechoslovakia, and then it's all out war. Like, so we can look back on that now and go, of course, like, Lloyd George should have fucking had him shot that day when he came in. The two of them had a meeting, a sit down, and, like, what was that, 1936 or 37? And Hitler was going, like, look, this is what's going to happen. And then they were like, we will appease you.
Chamberlain, wasn't it?
Oh, Chamberlain. That's it, Chamberlain.
Yeah.
And said, Neville was like, oh, yeah, but look, what do you need to be appeased? We'll just appease you. And I was like, yeah, okay, you will appease me, yeah? And then the next thing is fucking war then, like, the next October. So, like, it's very hard to comment on now. And what's annoying, Matthew, is that you're not allowed to comment on it. You can't even make a podcast on this because it'll get all these sort of things. You couldn't put it on YouTube. You can't promote it on Facebook or Instagram because you get bans. like, why are they stopping us talking about it if it's such a cut and dry, like, bullshit conspiracy? If it's lies, let sunlight be the best disinfectant. And we go, here's all these lies about January 6th. It was actually, an insurrection. It was the worst thing ever to happen since fucking Hitler. If that is the case, then let us talk about it. Like, no. All these things that you're not allowed to talk about now, to my mind, they're the things that we absolutely should be looking at in the finest detail. Like, they're nearly pointing to the things that they've done and going, don't talk about that ever. Okay, what's that now? Because I'm going to find out everything about that motherfucker. Like, it's like a child that what have you got in your hands? Nothing. And then they're putting their hands behind their back even more. Like, So
yeah, I think the 2022 November what year is it now? Yeah, 2022. The midterm elections. They'll be a good indicator of. In theory, there should be a continuation of the 2020 vote.
It'll be a red wave. It'll be a red wave because they can't. They can't shenanigans.
They're trying their best to, because they're throwing gun law and abortion back into the mix, which nobody was, like you say, nobody was speaking about these for years on end, and all of a sudden it's the economy is rubbish, but the Republicans want to take away your abortion rights. So it's
like that came out of nowhere, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And
it wasn't even official, bro. It was a fucking leak. Like, it's still not official that they're taking it out. Like, but people are fucking, throwing buckets of red paint on themselves in front of the Capitol building.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think it's to remind and reactivate, Democrats who are probably wavering on at least just abstaining from voting or possibly switching because of the shit show that the current administration is, or possibly awakening to the probable corruption that we've just been speaking about.
Definite corruption. Like, there's definitely corruption, and measurable and demonstrable corruption. But the thing is, you're not allowed to talk about it in mainstream. You're not allowed to have it on social media, so the right-minded people can't get their hands on it. But what's happening is emotional and psychological abuse, emotional and psychological manipulation to violent action. So these people are out doing these protests, and they fucking love protesting. They love an old march. So it's just like, what's next? Are they going to get rid of Roe v. Wade? Because that's a real hot button. They're not. Well, let's just pretend there's a leak. Is there any trace on the leak? No, we won't say who. I'll tell you, let's just tell them it's all Brett Kavanaugh. They fucking hate him. And then it was all that Brett Kavanaugh shit all got, because that wasn't resolved. And I don't know if you take part in any kind of like psychotherapy or anything like that. Like, all of these traumas that you have over your life, like they keep on rolling back up again and rolling back up. So the whole country was traumatized by that Brett Kavanaugh thing. Blasey Ford saying, like, he did that to me, and then loads of people are going, I don't believe you. And then loads of victims of sexual assault were going, you can't say that. And it was this huge thing. And then it just kind of just went away because he was conferred and he was on the Supreme Court. And then it just didn't get talked about anymore. But a load of people's fucking open bleeding hearts and unstable emotional states about the things that happened to them in actual reality, in real life. It was all stirred up and mixed in with politics and mixed in with all that stuff. And then it just got like cemented over. And now the fucking weeds are growing up through the cracks in the cement. And then all of a sudden, Roe v. Wade comes up, and all those people are activated again, going, "What? Again? Brett Kavanaugh?" And it's fucking pouring gasoline on the embers of a fire that had almost gone out. They're like out protesting again, shaking their tits at the Supreme Court, throwing red paint at each other, and fucking crazy mental illness shit, like going out in a fucking giant. You see the one who's going out in a giant suit, and she had a fucking like a sumo suit, and in the sumo suit was like 20 fucking babies covered in like bacon fat and like fake blood and shit like that, and she was just pulling these babies out of her gi, right, pulling them out of her fanny in the suit, and then like chopping them in half and stuff like that. Going, abortions are brilliant, I love killing babies. Blah. Like, it was fucking weird. Like, I'm very much like pro-choice, by the way. Like, I'm not a pro-lifer. Like, go on, have an abortion if you want to, but that's fucking a public demonstration of mental illness there. Like, that's not right. Like, so between getting caught up in that, getting caught up in these fucking drag library shows, getting caught up in fucking Joe Biden being a porridge head, like making fun of all these little gaffes and all these little weird speeches that he's giving. Like nobody's really talking about that that's actually happening. And I saw a meme the other day when it was like when Hillary Clinton was in court for this thing, we had the Pulse nightclub shooting. When she was in court for this thing, we had the Virginia Tech shooting. When she was in court for this thing, so anytime Hillary Clinton's in trouble, there's a fucking shooting. So that most recent one in Texas, in Uvalde or whatever, Hillary Clinton was up. There was some Durham report shit going through the courts that they didn't want to be on the mainstream news, and they were just talking about the shooting loads. And like, I don't know about you, man, but like, if I was an American right now, and I was a gun owner, and they were coming to go like, we're going to make it illegal for you to have guns, I'd be like, and when are you planning on putting us all into concentration camps? Because it really feels like that's what's happening next, you know?
I don't think they possibly could actually achieve that, though. I mean, they could sign all the laws they like, but people aren't just going to go, oh, well, here you go, here's my gun back. Because the people who have them believe in the right to have them so much.
They do, but if enough people give them back, there won't be enough to fight back, and you'll end up with, like, what, a dozen Ruby Ridges all over the country where there's, like, one farm of guys who are like, from my cold, dead hands, you know, this kind of thing.
Well, there's your civil war kicking off.
That's what I mean, like, that's what I mean. In Canada, they've initiated a ban on handguns and any semi-automatic stuff like the AR-15, you know, the rapid fire and guns. But there's a buyback program going on. They did that already in Australia after the Port Arthur massacre, and they had a big gun buyback system. Canada's done that now, where Trudeau made a prime ministerial edict, said like, all the guns, no, give them all back, buyback. And if I was a Canadian, I'd be like, no fucking way, man. They were already putting concentration camps because of COVID, and people went along willingly because Canadians are too polite to say no. So, like, what the fuck, man? You're living in Canada, and then you don't take the next, monkeypox injection, and then they come along in a van and go, get in the van. And like, I don't want to get in the van. Get in the van. Oh, well, now, I feel I don't really have to get into the van. Like, have you got any guns in the house? No. Well, you've no way of fucking defending yourself then. Get in the van or we're going to shoot you. Well, okay, I don't want any trouble. You know? And they just get into the van, like. They saw it in Australia, the cunts didn't have guns, and they had them all living in fucking some kind of weird, like, Auschwitz version of Butlins. And they weren't allowed to fucking... they weren't allowed to go past... They had, like, yellow tape outside their little garden, and it's like, don't move anywhere. And people were allowed to film in there. They had their phones. So they were just in like white paper pajamas on the little veranda trying not to cough on fucking Facebook and on Twitter posting going, in my concentration camp, look, click, here's the neighbours and blah, blah, blah. Like, would you ever think you'd see that? Where the Australian police were coming in and bagging and tagging people like fucking Colombian cocaine smugglers and bringing them off to these fucking camps out in the country and putting them in little wooden shacks and saying stay there for 6 weeks or some shit, like, you know?
I suppose that is the point. You know, we never thought we considered that it could happen, all of these things, and we certainly spoke about them, but they were conspiracy theories. And as I say, we've moved beyond the conspiratainment and we are now living it. But it's bleak.
there's a trauma thing in that too, though, Matthew, where I'd say if you said a lot of that stuff to any Tom, Dick, or Harry in the street, most of them have forgotten it. Like, it's like, those memories have dissolved away like sugar in tea because they were so crazy and unique and traumatic that it felt like some kind of dream state that that disappears upon waking. And now they're back in work and they're kind of, you're like, oh, where have the last 2 years gone? I know, look at all these wrinkles. Oh, my little boys that are growing up so much. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of fun working from home, Yeah, wasn't it great? Anyway, and you have the fucking old computers and Carol's fish from the fucking canteen still. Like, fucking bitch, man. Stop bringing fish in for lunch.
It is painful for watching, the people who forgot everything. But they not forgot, but they just don't want to speak about it anymore. They'll just go, well, that happened. Like that's been and gone.
Tell us about when you got fucking psychologically assaulted for 2 years. I'd rather not talk about it. Yeah, all right then. Come here, do you remember this happened? No. I do remember Tiger King and something. What else? Do you know what I mean?
I actually have a lot of time for the people who are still participating because, they've picked the side and they're going to carry on doing that regardless of, government saying, actually, it's all right now. But they've just carried on. Anyway, I'd rather that than the people who go, oh, well, I'm waiting for the government to tell me what I can and can't do still.
Yeah.
But they've carried on, I'll still wear my mask, etc., etc. And it's like, well, at least you've picked a side and you're consistent.
Yeah.
it's the wrong one, but at least it's consistent.
Yeah, they're not flip-flopping. I mean, like,
yeah,
the fear worked better on some people than it did on others.
Yeah.
There was people waiting there going like, as soon as it's not illegal to go into pubs with no mask on, I'm doing it. And there's other people who are going, if I'm going into the pub, I'm definitely wearing a mask. And there's some people going, there's loads of people in those pubs not wearing a mask. I'm just going to stay at home, because they're genuinely afraid of, getting something and being sick and possibly dying. And that's okay. Like, I'm not saying any of those people are stupid or sheeple or any of that fucking stuff. Like, you do you. That's the whole point about freedom, like, that you can do what you want to do. And if you are afraid to go out, like, that's really sad, I think. And like, if there was anything could be done to inform you better, or there was any factual or scientific studies that show, like, if you keep on getting boosters, that you're going to end up having at least some kind of complications like myocarditis and stuff like that. If there was anything, like, there was any factual thing at all, secret there is, any kind of factual, scientific studies that you can point to say that, like, men aged 18 to 45 are suffering from heart failure and, sudden adult death syndrome and stuff like that because of vaccine complications. It's just a secret. There are studies that do that. That, like, even if one person was able to prove to the pharmaceutical companies that he was damaged in such a way by vaccine, like, and get a court ruling, let's say, for some kind of compensation, some kind of monetary, like a remunerative compensation from the pharmaceutical companies, which is unprecedented because there's already kind of caveats in the legislation that the pharmaceutical company, see, I'm sick now talking about it, that there's a clause within the agreement that the pharmaceutical companies had with the government that, like, if they do administer these things, that you're not allowed to sue. But this, like, even if one person was able to prove medically, scientifically to a court that taking those vaccines caused damage, and that the pharmaceutical companies were forced to remunerate him for his, like, compensate him for his damage, it would prove that, yes, the vaccines do damage to people. Like, if there was even one person that had happened to, it could cause a cavalcade. Secret, there is one guy, and he got the money off the pharmaceutical companies. It's a secret. See, like, nobody hears about that shit. Nobody hears about those things. This motherfucker got a ball of money. Like, I think he's a Canadian, and he successfully sued the pharma companies, and he got a few dollars for having myocarditis. Like, again, in 20 years' time, we'll be looking back on this going, oh my God. But in 80 years' time, we'll be looking back on it the same way as we were looking back on Spanish flu. Remember in March 2020, everyone was like, what's the Spanish flu? What happened the last time this happened? Oh, shit. Like, that's what was being peddled to us.
I remember seeing the Wikipedia entry for Spanish flu being changed. One day it read that it lasted 18 months, and then the next day it read that it lasted like between 3 and 4 years. And I went, oh, that's odd.
Yeah.
That's it's very odd. But I mean, we've obviously got quite serious here for the last hour or so. I was just going to randomly ask you, do you have a guilty pleasure conspiracy theory? Like that you find particularly fun but isn't necessarily heavy?
Oh,
I'll throw one out there. But I enjoy the idea that dinosaurs didn't exist.
Yeah, Australia is a hoax. That's a great one. Australia is not real.
Yeah,
I have a bunch. I have a bunch of different ones. I might give you an exclusive. I'll give you some of the future episodes coming up, like funner.
I was going to ask you what have you got coming in the future, because you were up at Loch Ness recently, weren't you, poking around at
man,
Alistair Crowley's old house?
Part of a documentary made by a man called Ashley Cowie and a bunch of other great heads. We all went to Boleskine, and it was fucking great crack, man. Like, we got to, like you said, poke around the front room of Aleister Crowley's. Now, it wasn't a house intact; it was, pulled back to the bare stone walls because it's being refurbished. But in an authentic and from a place of love, from a place of authenticity, to bring it back to what it was originally when Crowley owned it, because it had been renovated and had been burnt down a couple of times. Even in the 21st century, I think it's been burnt down twice and sold and changed hands and stuff like that. So there's a foundation that owns it now, and it's going to be preserved as a historical site. And it was really fucking cool to be there. Obviously there's still the Crowley shadow hanging over you, but I felt it was really good fun. So I have episodes coming up this season. I have one on Rasputin, which is fucking hilarious, man. Talking about his massive cock a bunch. With Operation.
You've not said the line yet.
What's that?
The shooting your muck. You normally say
blowing your beans, shooting your muck. Yeah.
Yeah. me and my partner always pop every time you eventually say it in an episode. I think I tagged you the other day. It was 22 minutes into the Barry Seal episode before you said it.
Blowing me muck. Yeah, I love saying muck. We've got one coming up on Operation Mockingbird, which is really, really good fun with Emmett and Ed. We got one, the Salem witch hunts, which was fantastic to investigate. Obviously, it was tied it back to modern day politics a little bit and tell the story of public hysteria, looking at little studies about groupthink and
Did you mention Ghislaine Maxwell in that episode?
No, why? Is she a witch?
Didn't she get found in that house, and that wasn't too far away from where that happened? Oh, there was a bunch of people linking that sort of thing. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know, but there's no witchcraft there. That was all. Salem witch hunts was it was political. And then we have one on Pizzagate, which was I feel. No, as we did it, I feel from listening to every single Pizzagate episode that was on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, with just the Pizzagate case itself, which is the John Podesta, the Walsh guy that shot up the pizza parlor, and the theories around that, the people involved like Alefantis and Hillary Clinton and all that stuff, just taking that into consideration, not going outside the lines or not going into crazy global pedo networks or adrenochrome or any of that kind of stuff, but just that Pizzagate thing from October 2016 to maybe February, March. Didn't do any Epstein stuff, didn't go into it any deeper like that. But that Pizzagate episode, it's about 6.5 hours. And I feel that it is the Pizzagate podcast of record. I feel it's some of my best work. Claire and Ed Salmon joined me on that episode. And I think I did about 14,000 words of notes. Pulling from netnographic, online sources. Shit that I had saved, Matthew, for 2, 3, 4 or 5 years. I have this app and I can save websites into it just for the click of a button, and all them websites were gone, bro. All the information was gone.
Did you have Alefantis' Instagram?
Yeah, all the pictures from it and everything.
Yeah, they were
crazy.
I mean, if you need evidence, what more?
But you can't say that that's true either. You can't say what more do you need, because Tom Hanks' Instagram is fucking weird as well, but you can't say he's anything to do with anything.
God, his Twitter account, constantly posting pictures of
baby
missing children's clothes and stuff.
Yeah,
but then it all goes back into the QAnon stuff again. It's
and is then delegitimized in the eyes of right-minded people. You see, because they put it back. All you have to do to fucking make a conspiracy theory completely unbelievable or unpalatable is just give it the Q whitewash. Throw through Q, and most people won't fucking touch it with a barge pole. But next season, I plan on doing a couple of revisited episodes. Charlie Manson, which is such a good topic, so I want to revisit that one and give it the 2022 treatment. A good 6 or 7 hours. Go right deep. He was a CIA asset, I believe. He was the tip of the spear of this hallucinogenic mind control, war weapons. He was part of him and Jim Jones were part of a group of cult makers that were working with or for the CIA to try and see what they could do manipulating people's minds. And I'm also going to revisit the Nikola Tesla episode and give it the 2022 treatment. So yeah, like, classics reimagined. Want to do one of the Spanish Inquisition? It's not what you think, even. It's fucking brilliant. Such a good fucking episode. That's going to be the Disney Corporation.
Are these all already recorded, or
no? This is going to be season 9. So the ones I called out, like Rasputin and all, they're all already recorded. Pizzagate. And,
the Disney one's obviously in motion at the minute, really. Isn't
that's the thing. You see, I just wanted to
happening all the time.
Wait that extra little time and just wait until there's another few hundred employees convicted for paedophile acts, and then we can say it with a degree of certainty.
One of their cruises went to Epstein Island, didn't it?
I mean,
that's one of the. I mean, that's a red flag. Fucking, there was one again, like
all the different color flags, man. Those motherfuckers, like all the way back. I'm going to go all the way back to like early Walt and really good episode. The Magdalene Laundries. I don't know if you know about them.
No,
Magdalene Laundries were a set of nuns in Ireland, the Magdalene sisters, and they basically would take in young girls, waifs, who had been either promiscuous or sexually assaulted and become pregnant, or if you were like particularly promiscuous in 1940s and 50s and 60s, even like 20s and 30s, but 40s, 50s, 60s Ireland, if you were found to be having extramarital sex on numerous occasions, it was kind of like a borstal but for young girls, and they'd send them off to the nuns, and what they would do was keep them there until they were old women and died. So like it was like a prison, but the only crime was a moral and religious crime, and they were just made the ward of care of these Magdalene sisters. But if you were sent there because you were pregnant, say from a teenage dalliance, or you were sexually assaulted by your uncle and you got pregnant or whatever, you couldn't bring shame on the family, so they'd pack you up and send you off to the nuns. And then you'd have the baby in the laundry, in the nunnery, right? In the convent. And they'd take your baby and they'd sell it to like a very rich American or English family that couldn't have kids. And if the baby was born with any kind of defects or any kind of deformities, they just like hit it in the head with a hammer and throw it into the sewage tank down the bottom of the garden.
I have heard of that.
Yeah,
actually, did that come out in the papers recently?
Only a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
there was a workhouse in Tuam, and in Ireland, and they found over 830 babies' bones in this septic tank, and all the babies had like holes in their heads from getting popped with a
yeah. I definitely remember the story in the papers of that a few years ago.
But what's crazy is there was hundreds, if not thousands, of people that were like, I don't know who my parents are. And they all came back and implored the government to be able to like give them the records to go like, I want to be able to find my naturalized family, like, and you shouldn't have let this happen and blah blah blah. It's like the great Irish shame, that this was allowed to happen in the church. Whatever about like diddling altar boys and shit like that. They were literally like human trafficking babies for like 50 years. And this was the thing, like the rich Americans would come over and go, hey, have you got a nice red-haired green-eyed baby for us to bring back to California? Like, and the fucking nuns would be like, I do, I just had one there fresh this morning. And they go out and they get the baby and they hand them over for fucking cash money. So they were selling babies like these motherfuckers, So it's a really good episode. There's a movie on it called The Magdalene Sisters, like really, really good. Finally, I'm doing an episode on the Las Vegas shooting, which is, I mean, right on
Nobody
time.
remembers that anymore.
That's what I mean.
I know that much.
That's what I mean. They don't remember it, and all the little nuanced details and stuff like that. I have it all saved. Don't worry, man. I'm doing a very interesting episode on the Chinese Cultural Revolution, which is super fun because we don't really get to talk about, Russia or China or any of the history there in the political history because shit's in another language and it's real hard to find stuff on, right? But I had a load of these books on the Chinese Cultural Revolution. I don't know if you know how it happened. But what they did was, and they'll, shout out if it sounds familiar. What they did was they demoralized the youth, and they told them that like, if they didn't have a drastic change in the regime of the country, in almost an anarchistic way, that they would tear down the old. Everything old was bad. Anything that was legacy was abhorrent. And this new culture had to rise up and take over. So they ousted the government, they installed Mao Zedong, and they ushered in a period of, communism that is still there to this day. It very quickly resulted in like famine, death camps, ethnic cleansing, loads of mad shit, basically. But it started with the empowerment of the young generation into hating the culture of the old generation so much that they wanted to just burn the country to the ground. Does it sound familiar to you?
Very much so. Yeah.
I mean, demoralization.
Living through it.
For sure, man. Yeah, some Yuri Bezmenov shit. I want to do one on the George Bush and the Bush family dynasty.
You touched on that in the Barry Seal episode.
Little bit. Clintons as well, they're into that shit, man. I want to do an episode on Planned Parenthood, aka the Negro Project, which is, I mean, I had planned to do these a long time ago because obviously COVID and stuff like that, my timeline has been a bit stretched out. But imagine if I had an episode on Planned Parenthood like released a month ago when all the fucking Roe v. Wade shit was going on. Like, would you support Planned Parenthood as much? I don't think so, because it's fucking a crazy organization. And then an episode on Watergate, which should be whopper.
I was listening to, have you ever listened to the American Exception podcast?
No.
It's a guy called Aaron Good.
Oh, yeah.
He's got a book coming out. I spoke to him a few months back. I just finished listening to an episode he did about Watergate as well. He's got quite a lot of good information. If you wanted to check that out, that'll probably help you out.
There's a brilliant one on Slow Burn. Did you ever listen to Slow Burn?
No.
Brilliant podcast. The first season is about Watergate. The second season is about Bill Clinton and his sexual improprieties. He did not have sexual relations with that woman. He just blew his muck on her dress. Hey-oh. See, I got it in there for you.
It gets me even better in Clinton's accent.
Yeah. This song is called Blow Your Muck. There's a new TV show coming out about that now as well on FX called Impeachment, an American Cum Story or something like that. And it's basically
that was on BBC. Was it BBC? It was on the TV here.
There's a new one. There's a new one coming out now. Like, it's like a dramatization. They have actors playing it and all. It's this whole thing.
Yeah, it was that. It was out.
Oh, was it out already?
Year, I think. Yeah, I've got it all recorded on my. But I've just not watched it yet. But I'm sure it's already been out.
Oh, really?
I could be wrong.
Impeachment, American Crime Story. Oh, yeah. There you go. How come I'm only seeing ads for it now? Or maybe it was ads on the old TV shows I was downloading. Yeah, on FX, Impeachment, an American Crime Story, 10 episodes that premiered in September 21. Yeah, there you go. But yeah, it's based on the book. Oh fuck! It's based on the book, The Real Story of the Sex Scandal That Nearly Brought Down a President, by Jeffrey Toobin, who was very famously renowned for having a wank after a Zoom call. Did you hear about that?
It rings a bell again.
Rang his bell. Jeffrey Toobin, he worked for CNN, and they were having like a Zoom call with like 10 or 12 people, and they were like, and Jeff was like, okay, thanks very much, guys. He's like, okay, see you, Jeff. And then he went out straight away, and to celebrate the brilliant Zoom call, he came back fully naked, and he started fucking pulling the guts out of himself under the table, and he was still on the fucking, and no one thought to go like, Jeffrey, we can see you jerking off, Jeff. Or just like go in and press the button and switch his camera off. But yeah, full wanks for Jeffrey Toobin.
That brings us in a nice circle, actually, because that's what I thought was going on at the beginning of this episode.
I like I said, you get dirtier than you think washing a baby. Today's Father's Day, man. You know. Had to spend time with the children and putting her to bed and stuff like that. So I ended up having to have a shower myself, running quickly to this show, clean, fresh, and ready to go. But had a good time, man. I wish we had more time. We can do it again.
Great. Yeah, well, thank you for giving me your time today. It was a mad laugh in that, as I expected it to be.
Bit of crack. It's all well-worn stuff, though, you know, like all that stuff. It darkens my heart to think, naturally, that we can't really talk about this. Like, you were at that show, that George Orwell show, you know, and I plan on releasing that like pretty soon. You know, an amalgam of the different versions of it. You know? And because like you said, I didn't get to the very end in Glasgow. I ran out of time, but so I did it as I went along in Liverpool and Birmingham and Newcastle. I did some bits longer and some bits shorter, so we got the whole thing in. But this stuff is not new. Like, this stuff is not unique. It's not like fresh for the human race. Like, this shit has been happening and has happened, that will continue to happen. It's just annoying that when you're in the middle of it and you're like, look at this, and people are going, yeah. But also, there's a new season of fucking this, or like, you know, the Rings of Power is about to come out on Amazon. Oh, or like, oh, there's people reading the kids in drag, instead of going like, yeah, Hillary Clinton's like a war criminal. Like, it's so annoying that you can't just point to the truth and have everyone understand it straight away. You know,
it's almost too simple that's what we want, isn't it?
Yeah. we endeavor to do it bit by bit, and I'm sure you're doing it yourself. If you want to tell people, because I'm going to be putting this up as a spotcast, like, tell people about your show and where they can find you before I say goodbye to you.
Yeah, well, I'm on politicaldarkside.com. You'll get a link tree to watching the show on YouTube if you want, or you can just listen to it through all the usual outlets. There'll be an RSS feed if you want to put it onto a different kind of player. The remit of the show's, you know, politics and conspiracies, but there's a Scottish flavour to it because I'm based in Aberdeenshire. So, you know, I've spoken to, you know, the leader of the Scottish Libertarian Party, for example. I try and do bits and pieces around that, but like my real interests are obviously, you know, conspiracies and whatnot. I've spoken to some pretty interesting people like Richard Gage, the 9/11 guy.
Yeah.
Ray McGovern, who used to be pretty high up in the CIA. Yourself is...
This is a great guest. I'll be honest with you, I haven't listened to your show yet. I met you in real life and I said I was going to come in raw and we can have the chats from what we know each other from slapping hands in real life. But I'm definitely going to go back and go through a few of your shows now.
It's taken me a while to get to a point where like I'm happy with the technical aspect of the show, if that makes sense. You know, like initially I had like, you know, audio issues and whatnot. Didn't know what streaming service to use. I'm still sat in my bloody kitchen, you know.
Yeah, but you're looking
at
a fucking journey
or anything. So
no,
yeah,
it's a journey, dude. You know, that's the way it goes. Like we have to take one step at a time. I'm only blessed that I have other people from Patreon that are there from the very start, pretty much. Like I'm blessed. Like, you know, I really am, and it's helped.
I mean, this is your full-time job, of course.
Yeah, it has been for 5 years, so it's a real kind of like, it's a blessing, like, to be able to have it as your job, but also to have the people have faith enough in you to be able to give you money to be able to make it better. So now it fucking sounds awesome, it looks awesome. There's loads of stuff being done, and like, you know, there's room for everybody in this space, and if you're good, and the cream rises and all that stuff. But it sounds like you've some whopper guests on there, man. I'm definitely going to give it a spin.
Great, thank you. Well,
and you're a lovely man, Matthew. You're a lovely fella to meet in real life. You know, I'm all right. I'm a little bit, you know, self-effacing. You know, I'm not that. You know. But yeah, you're a lovely dude, man. Thanks for the chats, and we'll do it again sometime.
Join us next time for the Political Darkside podcast.
It's a disaster. Whose idea was that? It's just ridiculous.
Available on iTunes, Google, and Spotify. For more information, visit politicaldarkside.com.
Hello.
Story, man.
It's all right. How are you doing?
Very good. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. That was kind of disconcerting, you know, sitting there with the red light of the camera blinking, but knowing you could see me if you were just sat there, just reminded me of that, you know, that episode of Red Dwarf where like Rimmer goes mad and he's behind the...
Yeah, and he's dressed up like a rag doll.
Yeah, and he's got Mr. Flibble, the little... thought you'd just appear like that and like watching me for the last 5 minutes
from the darkness. I'm sure we could do that. I could do that. Hold on a second. We can see if we figure that out. Make that happen.
Oh.
Hello, Dave Lister.
Yeah, that's definitely disconcerting.
I give you the fucking private pile, fucking Full Metal Jacket. That's what I do there.